Right. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, just making sure that it was streaming for recording the meeting. I'm Councillor Carol Jewell, and I chair the Planning Committee, which consists of 9 elected borough councillors supported by a range of professional officers. It is the committee's responsibility to determine a planning application using current national and local planning policies and other relevant planning considerations. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Because I can bring it closer. Yeah, sorry. I've coughed. There's a formal set of procedures which must be adhered to. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those speakers who are registered to speak will be invited to address the committee with a strict time limit of 3 minutes. No one else, including borough, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions or interject into the meeting. Everyone has had the opportunity to comment on each application through the consultation process. Once the representations have been made, the committee will discuss and debate an application, seeking clarification where necessary from the council's professional planning officers. We can only focus on the proposal before us. Our role is not to suggest alternatives, nor consider the need for the development or whether it's too costly, or whether there are alternative uses for the site or more suitable uses of land elsewhere. Planning proposals can often generate strong opinions both for and against a development, but committee business needs to be conducted in a professional and orderly manner without interruption from the public gallery. As chair, I have the discretion to remove individuals from the meeting in accordance with point 8.2.6 of the Council's Constitution. This includes suspending the meeting and or terminating the webcasting of the meeting. That bit done. First item on the agenda is apologies. We've got no apologies. Minutes of the previous meeting. These have been circulated. Is everybody in favour of those? Could I have a show of hands, please? Lovely, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest?
It's for both.
Both. Oh yes, there's 2 sets, I beg your pardon. Good job, it's on the ball. Are you happy to confirm those minutes for both those meetings? Yeah, okay. Declaration of interest. Yes, Wayne.
I won't be taking part in the first application, 250452.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. Applications to be deferred and withdrawn. I don't think we have any. No. Okay, so the first item is application 250452, which is a GTO house, Floral Mile, Bath Road. I'd like to ask the officer, Mark Croucher, to present the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly share my screen and give you a short presentation. Just bear with me a moment. Thank you. So, as it says on the screen, this is a full application for the proposed erection of a workshop, including associated storage, landscaping, hard standing, following the demolition of the existing building. So I'll just quickly take you through a couple of slides. So this is the application site here, outlined in red. So if you can see my cursor, yeah. So the main access to the site is the access on the left here. The access on the right I tend to refer to as sort of an ornamental access, as that leads into the to the main building, but it's not the main access used by the occupiers. The building being demolished is this one here. I've got some further plans that just showing, which is essentially sort of an arc-shaped, old-looking barn. The main building on the site is here, which looks more like a sort of stately manor house. There's a building just to the small wooden building to the south, which is also being demolished. And this large structure here is actually a temporary structure, and there is a condition to ensure that that's removed, subject to the proposal being erected. So this is just an aerial photo to show the site in a bit more context. You can see, pointed by the arrow, the building being demolished. You can see the main building here. You can't quite make it out, but there's a small building here with the one being removed, and you can see the temporary sort of marquee structure in white there. So this is the proposed site plan. So you might be able to make out, hopefully you can, but there's some dotted red outlines of the buildings being removed. So the small building here, again the arc-shaped barn here, and the temporary structure there. And you can see the extent of the proposal there. It should be noted as well, it does mention in my report, there are going to be 3 places where there would be landscape enhancements, and they would be roughly here, just there where the cursor is, and also on the boundary here. Although the permission doesn't rely on this, I thought it would be useful to show a previous approval on the site for something very similar. So this is a previous approval back in 2000, and you can see it's broadly similar in size in the way it extends from the building. So these are the proposed elevations. You can see the main building to what I would refer to as the main building, GTO house there. And the building extends away from that. As you can see, it's got a much lower profile in terms of its ridge height and eaves height. And you can see the side profile of the building there with gable ends. And these are the other elevations. These elevations wouldn't really be readily visible from the public realm, as this one backs onto the tree belt to the north, and this one as well backs onto the corner of the site. This is a section of the building. The building, despite its look, is actually contained 2 floors, which you can see in this section. So it's neatly sort of confined within the building. I've got some floor plans just to show that. You see the ground floor plan there with spaces for vehicles and car maintenance, and also storage and various ancillary rooms. There is a car lift, which is how you'd get from one floor to the other internally. These are just some CGIs just to show you the building in a bit more context. I think, as I said in my report, the building strikes a good balance between respecting the countryside location and also kind of an attractive modern design. It's quite refreshing to see actually a building of this nature have a nice striking design which sits comfortably within the landscape. This is just another CGI just showing the building as well. As you can see, it's got large banks of glazing with this kind of frame around them. So here are just some site photos just showing the site in a bit more context. This is the main building, which I refer to as GTO House. Below this is the building being demolished. As you can see, it's like an arced sort of corrugated barn. The 2 photos from the top are looking to the north tree belt, just showing the screening to the north, which would screen the building. The photograph on the bottom left is what I would refer to as the sort of ornamental access onto Bath Road. The photo on the bottom right is the main access, and that's taken from Munbury Hill, just looking into the site there. And this is just an aerial photo at a slight angle I thought might give a bit more helpful context. Just see the building there and the proposal there. So yeah, just some concluding remarks. There is actually just one small update just to draw members' attention to, which is just after some further clarification, and that is the proposed parking spaces, rather than 56, would actually be 59. So just to clarify that point. And it might be worth as well just drawing members' attention to the greenbelt threshold we're looking at here, which is set out in paragraph 3. So the threshold here is basically, would it cause substantial harm to the openness of the greenbelt? And we consider this falls significantly short of that threshold. So to conclude, Chairman, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions, and also a Section 106 agreement to ensure an employment skills plan. And I'll happily answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've got 2 speakers that are registered to speak on this item. James Crossland, on behalf of the applicant, or is the applicant, and Wayne Smith, who is a ward member. James, could I invite you to come up to the front to use the microphone? Remind you that you have 3 minutes, and I'm sure you've done it before. Just press the button to speak.
Good evening. I'm James, one of the owners of GTO Engineering, and I want to tell you a story about a 17-year-old girl named Marnie. She's a Year 12 student at the Holt School, just a few hundred metres away, and she studies chemistry, physics, maths and further maths, and hopes to read mechanical engineering at university. She's bright, articulate and hard-working, exactly the kind of young person we should be encouraging into STEM careers. You may be aware that last week was Work Experience Week, and many of her classmates struggled to find placements, especially ones aligned to their career aspirations. However, thanks to a long-standing relationship with the Holt School, Marnie was able to spend the week with us at GTO Engineering. She did great, and we loved having her there as well. Our ties to the school run very deep. Our financial controller, Kylie, attended the school there, as did several of our colleagues' partners and many of their daughters. And it's a really good example of how deeply rooted we are in the local community. But we don't do these things just to tick boxes. We do them because we are part of this community, and it's just the right thing to do. The only thing we have ever asked of our community is that the Borough Council support this planning application. GTO Engineering isn't just another car workshop. It's globally recognised as one of the leading restorers and engineers of classic Ferraris. We are very discreet about our work. We try to provide a really pleasant workspace for our employees and an absolute 5-star experience for our clients when they visit. Our founder very sadly passed away 3 years ago, and Lee and I completed a management buyout recently. We are both young-ish, and we are committed to building sustainable long-term business. GTO is not just another company to us, it is our life's work. We both live in the local area, within 3 miles of GTO House, as do many of our colleagues. Since taking over, we've focused on a pragmatic, high-quality approach to planning. The proposed upgrades to the site help us sustainably grow our business, enabling us to create new, highly skilled jobs, and in turn, to allow us to keep providing local young people, like Marnie, the opportunity to become some of the best engineers in the world. We're now minutes away from a decision which we've been hoping to get for over 10 years, so let me take a moment to thank those who've helped us get here so far. Firstly, to the Council's Economic Development team, who originally suggested we buy this site. To the many local councillors and MPs who've supported us over the years. To our neighbours and Walgrave Parish Council for enthusiastically supporting the scheme. And finally, to Mark Croucher for recommending this application for approval. I hope to shortly be thanking you all for your support too.
Thank you very much, James. Beautifully timed. Next one is Wayne Smith, who is the ward member.
Ward member for Thames, I fully support the officer's recommendation. There's no objections apart from the Highways request for further information on parking that has now been provided. So hopefully no objections overall. The application site sits behind the main building and would not impact the street scene and be detrimental, and creating no harm in any way, shape or form to any other green gap. You could possibly argue it now falls under our brand new grey belt policy, but I'll leave that up to Mark. GTO produces some of the best cars and has been home for some best engineering in Berkshire, if not the UK stroke the world. And it's been providing local economy with trade and employment for many years. I would urge you all to support the application and go with the recommendation on page 13. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Right, councillors, have you got any questions, any comments? Yes, Rochelle.
There was a question about increased pollution. Is that not happening? In here it said the possibly increased pollution by the neighbors. Is that a problem or not?
Mark, could I get you to comment, please?
In what sense? Air quality, do you mean?
Neighbours complained about it, I'm just wondering, that's all. If there's no effect, that's fine.
Yeah, the nearest neighbouring properties, I'd have to check my report, but they're a good, easily 100 metres away. Let me just find that section. 120 is the nearest neighbouring property. Also, the uses would be confined within the building, so I don't think there's any question about air quality or detriment to that.
Anybody else got any question or comments? Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think looking at the, I think one of the points from the officers, I think looking at the designs, I actually think I was quite impressed. Actually, I think we sure need to see more designs like this across the borough. I think it's, and I think my only initial concern was street scene, but actually when you look at it, it does sit behind the main building, so actually you're not going to see it anyway. Yeah, I think you know it looks really interesting. And I think we as a borough should do more to support these types of businesses to attract these types of jobs into our borough.
Thank you, Sam. Anybody else got any comments or questions? Okay, well, we need to make a decision. Have I got a recommendation for a proposal for either approval or otherwise? Sam? Anybody to second that, please? Yeah, thank you. So can we see a vote? That's a proposal to approve this application. Please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, just give time for Officer swap over and Wayne to return to the fold. If anybody wants to move forward, there's plenty of seats at the front now. Right, so we're now looking at application for land of South Oak Tree, Wangels Road, number 250407. James is the officer that's been looking at this. Over to you, please, James.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to everyone. The application I present to you today relates to land south of Wangels Road in Charville, reference number 250407. This is a permission in principle application for the proposed erection of 9 dwellings. And before I introduce the site itself, I feel it's important to discuss the nature and details of a permission in principle application, as I appreciate it's not a common application type, nor has such an application been discussed at the committee before now. So, the permission in principle consent route is an alternative way of obtaining planning permission for housing-led development and separates the consideration of matters of principle for the proposed development from the technical details of the development. Similar to the outline and reserve matters process, the permission in principle consent route has 2 stages. The first stage establishes whether a site is suitable in principle, and the second stage is when the detailed development proposals are assessed. The scope of a permission in principle is limited to location, land use, and amount of development, with all those matters linking back to the principle of the development. So now moving on to the site itself. As already stated, this is a plot of land located to the rear of Wangels Road. It is located amongst the cluster of houses bounded by Beggars Hill Road to the east, Ashenbury Lake to the south, and of course Wangels Road to the north and south. The plan currently on the screen is the location plan for the development, with the red line plan, with the red line indicating the application site. The plan now on the screen is an aerial image of the site, just to show the site and surroundings and a bit more context. The site is located in the designated countryside. However, it is in close proximity to both the settlements of Woodley to the west and Charville to the north. This can also be seen from the plan now showing on the screen. The yellow shading at the top of the screen is Charville, the settlement of Charville, while the purple shading is Woodley. The perception of the site from the street scene, or any other public vantage point for that matter, is limited, and accordingly the openness of the field is not very appreciable, except from within the site itself. This is shown from the images on the screen, which are taken from 2 points along Wangels Road. The landscape character impacts of the development reflects this, where, as a result, there would only be a limited localised impact. Furthermore, despite the presence of the lake to the south, the site is otherwise surrounded by established residential development and also bounded by mature trees and hedgerows along its boundaries. Accordingly, in referring to the site and its context, which I hope is now well established, the proposal is not considered to represent an illogical expansion of residential activity beyond its surroundings and would certainly not result in a coalescence of settlements. In turning to the locational sustainability of the site, 2 recent appeal decisions assist in considering this. The first of these was allowed in 2016, where the inspector concluded the site to be a sustainable location, with emphasis placed on good pedestrian access to both the nearby settlements of Woodley and Charville, which contain a range of shops and services plus adequate proximity to nearby public transport. The second application, whereby another new dwelling was approved, concluded that there was no evidence to depart from the inspector's decision relating to the sustainability of the site. This remains the case with the current application, given the identical locational context as the 2 neighbouring sites. And just for information, the plan on the screen, the blue shading indicates the site that was allowed at appeal in 2016, while the yellow site, also for a new dwelling, was approved by the LPA in 2022. Now, within the backdrop of the matters already discussed, an important consideration of this application is the borough's housing needs at this time, and incidentally, the council's ability to only demonstrate 1.7 years' worth of deliverable sites. Subsequently, in accordance with paragraph 11 of the MPPF, the tilted balance is engaged, and for the application to be refused, it would need to be demonstrated that any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. Given the context of what has already been discussed, the site's sustainable location, limited landscape impacts, and the social, economic and environmental benefit of 9 new homes at a time when there is an acute need for housing in the borough, it is not considered that the less desirable impacts would outweigh the benefits. And these less desirable impacts are not necessarily a consideration of this permission in principle application. So to conclude, the officer's recommendation is to grant permission, with any outstanding matters to be considered at the technical details consent stage. And I just want to make members aware at this point that conditions are not applicable to this application type. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I've got 4 people registered to speak. The first is Lee Cripps from the Parish Council. I'm sure you know the system, Lee. 3 minutes. And first time, so. Oh, is it? Oh, yeah. And press the button in front of you to speak to the microphone.
Okay, so yeah, Lee Cripps representing Charville Parish Council. Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. I'm here on behalf of the Parish Council to speak against permission in principle for these 9 houses. Conscious we are time limited, I've chosen to focus on just a few key areas tonight to hopefully prompt some questions from the committee. Those questions being main sewerage, density, transport and landfill. Speaking first to main sewerage, if you live in the vicinity of Charville and Wangels Road, you will not have failed to notice the attempts to install sewerage on the existing homes on Wangels Road. Even after an unsuccessful 6-month road closure, there's still no main sewerage available. Are we seriously expecting another 9 houses to have septic tanks with likely overflow drainage into Ashenbury Lake, regardless of how well planned? The lie of the land shows that any outflow from septic tanks would head towards the lake. I understand from speaking to residents, it's taken something like 16 years of campaigning towards Thames Water to get to where they are today, still no main sewerage. My second point is around density of housing. Many of the existing houses on Wangels Road are on plots of 1 to 1.5 acres each. Here we are talking about squeezing 9 houses into 2.3 acres, averaging less than 1/4 of an acre per dwelling, minus roads and shared amenities. This property density is far less favourable than that of the recently approved 75 homes in Charville, where density was also questioned. So why are the applicants trying to shoehorn multiple properties into a less than ideal space? Moving to transport and sustainability, having spoken to many of the current residents, it's fair to say that none of them use the bus service. This is due to multiple reasons, not least the distance to the bus stops, the inadequacies of the pavements along Wangels Road. This means that for 9 houses, we should be considering at least 2 cars per dwelling, making local journeys to get to shops, doctors, employment and schools. This is not a sustainable transport location. This is before even mentioning the highly compromised single-lane access road with traffic controls required as set out in the development plan. My final point in closing is around Ashenbury Park itself, in which this development would fall. It was a landfill site into which many years of rubbish was placed. Are we really suggesting that 9 family homes are built on land that may be contaminated with all kinds of unknown pollutants without full measures put in place? A grassy, open-aired environment is one thing, densely populated infill housing is another. In summary, whilst Charville Parish Council accept the land supply issue for building family homes within the borough of Wokingham, this feels nothing more than a profiteering land grab to squeeze 9 homes into an unsuitable plot of land where the applicant refers to infill. Adding 9 houses to a road of 8 existing dwellings, creating a wholly new development line, is not infill. Thank you.
Lee, thank you. Perfect timing. The next person to speak is a resident, Jim Gillett. Oh, okay.
Before I start, can I ask, I left some paperwork to be circulated. Has that been circulated? That will refer to.
Okay.
Beg your pardon, Chairman. Councillors, we understand that the Council is currently minded to approve this application. So before that decision is taken, I have time to present just 2 out of a much larger number of concerns which demonstrate that this application flies in the face of normal planning guidelines. My first point is the issue of context, and that's already been raised. Wolf Bond attempts to convince you that the proposed 9 new houses would somehow be just infilling and that they are somehow in context. Numerous submissions have already shown the absurdity of that claim. They are clearly neither in context nor in keeping. They're entirely new building line and in no way similar to the existing housing. We talked about one a moment ago that was built recently. That was 1 house on 1.5 acres. That's the context we're comparing with. Take a look at the picture from the WBC website entitled Illustrative Wider Context. That's what I circulated. Compare the existing with the proposed and decide whether you think that they are just infilling and just how in context they are. Wolf Bond also tell us that further homes in all directions. So using that same picture, you can see that, again, how many of their claims are simply not true. My second point has already been raised, and that's significant pollution. The land on which this application is based is reclaimed land. It's landfill from the same old 1940s, 50s gravel pits on which Ashenbury Park and the lake now sit. Now, there's nothing in the Wolf Bond report to suggest any testing's been done, However, we do know that there have already been serious leachate issues from nearby parts of the landfill site. That was on Beggars Hill Road. So Thames Water has been planning to install a main sewer. We've heard about that. Considerable work done over the last 6 months. They cannot find a route through the road. So it is highly unlikely that we will have mains drainage. We will stay on septic tanks and soakaways. Now, an open country park on contaminated reclaimed land is one thing, but are we really going to be building new homes of soakaways on such land where the soakaways will soak through that contaminated land, and we know it's contaminated, and straight into Ashenbury Lake? In summary, while we appreciate the pressures on the council to approve applications wherever possible, approving anything just to get your numbers is not a sound basis for good long-term planning. The residents of Wangels Road, and some of them are behind me, and the Parish Council ask you please to stick with good planning practice and refuse this wholly inappropriate and guideline-breaking application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. The next person, so I'm looking at the microphone on, but next person is Adam Constantinou, and he's the agent. Adam, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This application for permission in principle, or PIP for short, proposes the development of the site for a minimum and a maximum of 9 dwellings. At this stage of the PIP application process, only matters of location, land use and quantum are to be considered. The Council will retain control over all technical and detailed design matters at the subsequent technical details consent stage. These include consideration of mix, design, scale, ecological matters, and to reference the speeches of those before me, matters of drainage, pollution, ground conditions, etc. They are not for determination this evening. Firstly, I'd like to thank the case officer for their cooperation and maintaining an open dialogue throughout the application process. Given the limited scope of matters to be assessed this evening, I'll discuss each in turn. Location. As detailed in your officer's report, Wangels Road has been confirmed to be a sustainable location by the Planning Inspectorate in recent appeal decisions, by council officers themselves in recent local decisions, and by the council's highway officer when consulted upon this application. As concluded by the Planning Inspectorate, Wangels Road is within walking distance and cycling distance to a wide range of services and facilities within Woodley and Charville. The application is sustainably located, making it an appropriate location for the development. Turning now to land use. As confirmed in your officer's report, and as members will have seen during their site visit, the application site is neighboured by existing residential development and will read as a logical, well-enclosed addition rather than an isolated development. It's naturally contained by existing residential development and landscaping. Given the prevailing residential character of the area, the proposed residential land use is appropriate for its location. Moving on to quantum. As detailed within your officer's report again, the site can comfortably accommodate 9 dwellings without any adverse effects upon the amenity of neighbouring properties, and comfortable living environment can be created for future occupants. To conclude, this application for permission in principle represents a sustainable opportunity to secure much needed housing at a time of pressing need within the borough. As the application is for permission in principle, it is only a matter of location, land use and quantum that you are considering this evening. The scheme parameters shown illustratively on the accompanying master plan secure an appropriate design scheme, and the Council will retain control over the detailed design matters which are to be considered at the technical details consent stage. It is for these reasons that you are invited to determine this planning application in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Finally, we've got Catherine Harding, the local member, who's online. Yes, she is. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, committee. I would like to add some of my objections and reflect those from residents. As you've already heard from Jim and the Parish Council, we have serious concerns about this application for permission in principle for 9 houses on Wangels Road. As highlighted in the officer's report, the proposed development site lies in designated countryside, placing it in direct conflict with policy CP11. It introduces a new line of development in that critical buffer zone between Charville and Woodley, and reflecting on James's comments, of course, that's the small size of that that separation. It makes it even more important that it is it's sort of maintained in its value to both settlements. The proposed housing density is many times higher than that of the surrounding properties, representing a stark and inappropriate contrast with the character of the area. So this does not appear to be a development that reflects or respects its context, and as such I must raise objections to the quantum of the development. While I appreciate the environmental concerns are something that will be addressed in much more detail at a later stage, the location is intrinsically linked to some of these environmental concerns. So the site is immediately adjacent to Ashenbury Lake and in close proximity to Norris's Copse, which is a recently relisted local wildlife site and bird sanctuary, and we really seek to protect these valuable habitats from encroachment and pollution. Compounding this, as you've heard, the Wangels Road properties are not connected to the main sewage system, relying instead on septic tanks. Adding more housing without proper infrastructure risks environmental harm. And again, struggling to separate this from location, the site was used as a landfill for both residential and industrial waste until 1980, which raises serious concerns about ground stability, contamination and long-term health risks. So it appears that no risk assessment has been carried out on this, which is something that how we can consider development on this land and the associated change of land use that involves. Finally, this unusual application type has raised concerns about a lack of transparency, and at 9 homes is just below the threshold that I understand would require a more detailed application requirements. This site was submitted in the 2019 call for sites for the local plan, and some neighbours report residents approached to sell parts of their gardens to expand the plot. This raises fears that a larger scheme is being pursued incrementally, and as such I very much welcome your attention and scrutiny on this at this stage. So in conclusion, I view that this application does conflict with some of our own planning policies, poses environmental and safety concerns, and risks setting a dangerous precedent for a piecemeal, inappropriate development of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Right, committee members, that's our turn now for discussion. It has been said already about the limitations of what we consider for a PIP, a permission in principle application. It is unusual, I think, certainly I don't think this committee has done one before. We're normally talking about detail, access, etc., and that doesn't apply in this one, but we've been reminded of that several times. So who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Rochelle.
You talked about the 5-year land supply. What would 9 houses make to include the 5-year land supply? In other words, what percentage will that increase our numbers to make it the 5-year land supply? How many are we missing for the 5-year land supply? It might be an easier answer. And then 9 would do what to it?
Anybody want to take that one on?
Sorry, my mic wasn't working there. Yeah, it won't make a, I mean, it will make a positive contribution. It's not as simple as, it's reviewed yearly, and yeah, in terms of its contribution, I put at the end of the officer report, it would make a positive contribution, but in terms of percentages, differences, it doesn't necessarily work like that. At this moment in time, it's just seen as a positive contribution to the borough's housing need.
Is it a large contribution or a small contribution?
It's a modest contribution, but certainly considered positive.
Just be factual here. If it's 890 houses per year, and you've got 9 houses, divide one into the other, and you get 0.010. Right? That's the answer. However you cut it up.
Thank you, Wayne. And calculator. Brian.
If I could just jump in, Chair. Yeah, the percentage, as members know, the percentage is very small, but the percentage, what a site contributes in percentages is not necessarily of value. It is what cumulative developments contribute. And we've had many appeal decisions for small development sites where inspectors notwithstanding the fact that these are small sites, they should be afforded significant weight, even if they are for a couple of dwellings, because as a contribution, the NPPF makes clear that small developments have an important role to play, rather than relying on simply large strategic sites.
Thank you very much. Yes, Wayne.
But in fairness, Brian, I was just answering the question, and the answer was factual. So I visited this site on Friday, and I've never been round there before, and I was quite amazed what a lovely place it is. But I want to start with location. This, to me, is back garden development. Nothing else, nothing less. It's back garden development. However you cut this up, it is back garden development. And for as long as I've been on this committee, we've been against back garden development. But if we just go with what the applicant said, facilities and shops in walking distance. Well, I don't know where or how far you want us to walk to find these facilities and shops. I know Woodley very well, and I think the closest shop, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, would probably be going back to the old Tesco's on the old aerodrome site. Is that fair? Or back down to the old Just Tiles roundabout? Is that fair? New shop there, Morrison's. In Charville, there's a shop on the A4 that's just a one-stop shop. Other than that, you would go to the petrol station or you might walk into Twyford. That's not local. So that's just answering what the applicant said. And then logical was another thing the applicant used. The word is a logical site. Well, I regard myself as quite logical, and I would regard this site as not logical. It just doesn't flow. It's right next to a lake, and I know we can't mention all the things that would be associated with the contamination that could end up in that lake. It wasn't clear on the site visit, the land ownership. I've since spoken to the Country Park team, and they tell me that they do own 2 metres around the outside of that park, but it was very unclear on the site visit. I'm still not 100% that it's 0.99 of an hectare. I think that's manipulated, but I did say to you, James, could you please double check that? And I will go on what you tell me, because I've got no other things to, well, I could check it myself on Draft Logic, but so that's my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Wayne. Could take that question straight away, the level or the amount of...
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, there was a few points there. I'll start with the back garden development. It's not private residential garden. It's got part agriculture use, where they've been keeping horses, and there's scrubland, but it's not been used as private residential garden. Second point, sustainable location. I appreciate your point about the shops, but as I've said in the officer report, it's been deemed a sustainable location by a planning inspector, and an adjacent site has also been deemed sustainable by the LPA, and it would be inconsistent to depart from those conclusions. The point about the hectares, yeah, just to confirm, that has been measured numerous times. It is below the threshold of 1 hectare for permission in principle application. Sorry if I missed anything, but yeah, you can come back on any of those points.
Yeah, I take your point. I think it's just blurred lines around somebody's back garden versus houses at the back of the back gardens, but I do take your point. Would you regard this as a logical site? Because it wasn't in, as you have quite correctly recorded, I think it's page 55, top of page 55, when the local plan, 122, page 55, when the HELA 2021 didn't recommend this site, saying the land to be unsuitable because it was thought not to be related to the existing settlement pattern due to the impact on landscape and character. Now, for me, I can't see how that statement written by our spatial team in 2021, apart from, I do take on board what you said about the two sites, the single houses on very large plots, but this is quite a different, well, this is very different in context. So I can't see what's changed, apart from the fact that we don't have a 5-year land supply and we don't have an established local plan. So had we had both of those, we probably wouldn't be here tonight.
I mean, it's a difficult one to comment on. I obviously, like you say, you've said it yourself. We are in the context of the 1.7 years of deliverable sites, so we're significantly short of the 5 years. And obviously, that has changed since the assessment under the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment, and that is, yeah, I think that's obviously the largest contributing factor as to why we've come to a different assessment there. It's also a more detailed assessment, and we've been given, it's been obviously been given plans to assess against, as opposed to just identifying it for housing. But yeah, the largest contributing factor, as you say, is the housing and land supply position.
What's very difficult, James, for residents when you try to explain to them our position of a 5-year land supply and the fact that we don't have a local plan, in the context 9 houses, does it make a difference to where we need to be versus is this really good plan making? It's a really difficult conundrum for residents to understand. If this was for 500 houses and it was going to make an a material impact, I could understand it. But 9 in this location is very, very difficult.
I suppose that, I mean, I take on the challenge, but I suppose because it's not about how I think at this moment how many houses it can contribute to the local, to the deficit in supply, is the fact that the tilted balance is engaged. And that means that we need to sort of, you know, there is a presumption for us in favor of development unless we can really have adverse impacts of doing so, or it would have significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So that still stands. Yeah, I have some concerns about this site, but they are difficult for me to relate to locations, land use, and quantum. They're more related to, you know, how we're going to do with the infill site. You know, I don't know what is going to be there. I think maybe these are technical ones that I think need to be addressed at the next level. But from a pure, if you pure look at the location, is it sustainable? I don't think it's unsustainable. It's not an isolated development. It's different than the housing around it, but I think it's unfair to say that because those plots are very large, that will restrict us to only very large plots around it. My concerns are about the main sewage and you know, how to address with the landfill site. It's not a top agricultural land either, because it has been a landfill site till recently. But those concerns that I have are difficult to stop it at this stage, but they will become important at the next level. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Martijn. Yeah, I think that's the problem we're all facing, that we're so restricted in what we can look at and take into consideration. James, could I just ask about the sewage question? I just to get that clarified, because that's been brought up by all of the objectors from the public gallery.
Yes, of course. Again, I appreciate this permission in principle application is new for a lot of members. It's not come up much for us as a LPA either. But yeah, it is just a matter that a lot of these considerations aren't considered in this stage of the assessment, and that includes drainage and sewage. I would just note as well, the drainage officer has reviewed it from the stance of a permission in principle application and hasn't raised an objection. But again, it'll be looked at in a lot more detail at the second stage, the technical details stage.
That was my view, and things like access that we'd normally be discussing, we can't look at either. Anybody? Yes, Sam. Sorry, Stuart.
Thank you. Just one question, really, guys. What happens? I've never been into an application like this before. What happens when we get to stage 2? Does it come back to this committee?
I believe we would only come back if it was listed. It doesn't automatically come to the committee because it's not major residential development. But to answer your question loosely, a lot of these matters, drainage, ecology, landscaping, just because there's a permission in place, if this was to be approved, it doesn't mean they're any less scrutinised at the second stage as they would be if this was a full application. So, you know, it may be granted permission, but at stage 2, the technical details consent stage, if, for example, the ecological impacts, the LPA weren't happy with that, then they wouldn't be granted permission. So I think that's important to note. It's not any less scrutinised just because it's split up in a different way.
Thank you, James. Stuart, does that answer you?
I mean, what you're saying is we wouldn't have any input into that decision at all, this planning committee. It would be somebody else deciding. Is that what you're saying?
No, sorry, just similar to this application, this was listed by Councillor Catherine Harding, and that's why it's been brought to the committee today. So if the technical details consent application was also listed, it would also be heard at the committee.
Thank you. Sam, did you? And then Moses.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is around the conflict with core strategy policy CP11. For those who don't know, countryside protection. I mean, looking at this, does it look like the proposed development lies within designated countryside and maybe doesn't meet the outline in policy CP11, which would restrict development to specific circumstances, things like rural exception housing or essential countryside uses, but even in the officer's report, it does actually acknowledge this conflict. So just keen to understand that.
Yeah, so just to confirm, it is within designated countryside, and there is that initial conflict with CP11. When looking at the undermining purpose of CP11, which tries to maintain the quality of the environment and maintain the settlement limits, it's considered that it doesn't necessarily inflict on those objectives. But in any case, whilst it is unacceptable in principle, as Martine said, there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and which is why when the tilted balance is engaged, we don't think that the negative impacts of the development outweigh the benefits.
Thank you. Moses, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to confirm from James, on Friday when we went for the site visit, you said density was not a consideration at this stage. Is that still the case?
I suppose density would fall within amount of development. So yes, it is a consideration. But in terms of the site layout that's been submitted, it's indicative. It might change. Obviously, 9 dwellings is 9 dwellings, so the density wouldn't change significantly. But you wouldn't be able to necessarily refuse it on the layout of the site as it's currently proposed, because it's just an indicative plan at this stage.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions or comments? Okay. Right, we need to come to a decision on this application.
Maybe just one thing here, but I sort of followed up with, is that because of the landfill, yeah, and I checked, do a PIP, do we need an EIA before that one? And I think maybe, Brian, maybe you can say, I think it is not required at this stage for us to have an EIA.
That's
to get a PIP, yeah, so I have concerns about this site, technically ones, which I hope when it comes to the next ones, they can either be addressed or not. But for purely on principle of development, if you only look at those three things, I am struggling to find, you know, it is to say that it's not sustainable. I think that it's not fair. It is not an isolated one, and as I said, 9 dwellings is not. It's different than the one below, but I think that is more. It is not that. I think those large plots should be guiding us for this part of the part. So my concerns are with the technical part, which would be in the next phase at this stage.
Thank you, Martijn. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question on density, and looking at page 56 on paragraph 2.7, it addresses that. But can I just clarify with James, are you saying that density, if we had, as a committee, concern about density, it wouldn't be sufficient grounds to turn this down? Is that what you were saying, or perhaps I'm mishearing what you're saying?
I think looking within the amount of development, density is consideration which you could raise concern. But again, it goes back to the principle of development and the presumption in favour of sustainable development, whether the amount of development, the density would, as a negative impact in your mind, would demonstrably outweigh any benefits.
Right, thank you.
Could I just jump in, Chair? Thank you, James. Just on density, the permission in principle, the PIP, is looking at the amount of development, the amount. That's a number, 9 dwellings. It's not looking at how the 9 are distributed across a particular site, which could be 1 hectare in this particular case, or it could be 20 hectares. And so 9 dwellings as a quantum of development, the amount in this site area, is it appropriate? And to work out density is a calculation. It's how many dwellings per hectare. That's how we as planners work out density. So in this case, it's broadly 9 or 10 dwellings per hectare, which, again, if you are comparing it to surrounding residential plots, it's probably more dense. It would logically be, given they're very large plots with large houses and detached plots. But likewise, on suburban parts of Woodley, Charville, or more modern development, which you referred to earlier, Park Lane, I think it was 75 dwellings, the density may be significantly less than that. And so the question for committee is the amount of development for the size of the plot appropriate? Is it too dense if we're looking at density? Is it too many houses for the size of the plot? Officers would probably firmly advise committee that any kind of argument or reason for refusal over saying it's too much on 1 hectare of land probably wouldn't stand much of a chance being defended at appeal. In terms of what the committee has been presented in past committees, other developments, much larger developments, we have presented to you 40, 50 dwellings per hectare. And it varies. Where will all the dwellings be located within this 1 hectare? Will they all be in one corner? Will they be spread out evenly? Will they have small footprints? We don't know that at this stage. We could have a large proportion of this 1 hectare undeveloped, and we could have 9 very small dwellings in one side of it. Likewise, we could have 9 larger dwellings spread out. So is 9 dwellings as a amount of development appropriate? And obviously, the conclusions are in the report for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, 2 more hands.
I'm getting a bit more confused with this density permission in principle and outline planning application. So if you say it's 9 dwellings, and I come and put in 5-bedroom houses, and it's still 9, is that permissible? Because you're saying we don't know the layout at this stage. So 9, regardless of size, could affect the density.
I think the point is that this PIP application isn't on density, it's on numbers. And although we've got a plan in front of us, that isn't, it's only indicative, and it may not be the one that actually happens. So if we just look at that permission in principle, then that's what the officer has had opinion on. Yes, Brian.
I think that's a good opportunity just to sort of, obviously we've talked about it being a permission in principle. This is an opportunity for the committee to consider everything but detail. a red line, a land use, its location and the amount. I think we've established, listening to debate, that residential in itself as a land use is not incompatible with the site given it's adjoining other residential uses. And we've also acknowledged the site's location in respect to Charville and Woodley. Now, there's disagreeing views, there's a range of views on its level of sustainability, but the NPPF acknowledges that different places have different levels of sustainability, urban, rural, and simply relying upon public transport or having a reliance on private vehicle in itself is not the single acid test for the site's sustainability. This site isn't isolated, and as James has said earlier, it's logically adjoining existing residential plots. We can't ignore that, and we've got appeal decisions noting its proximity. So in terms of location, we've talked about the amount and we've talked about the land use. They're the three factors that we need to focus on.
Thank you, Brian. Wayne, was it you that put your hand up as well?
I understand what you've said, Brian, but I personally don't think it is a good use of the lake. I don't think it's a good site. It's right next to the lake. It's not a natural extension to the street scene. I understand why that one that you referred to earlier, James, that looks like a natural extension. You might get some infills coming up on Beggars Hill Road, who knows? Or one might already be coming our way. But they're what I would call natural infill extensions. I don't think it is a good location, and I don't think the density is right. And all right, if you've got two and then you throw in the fact that it's not logical, it's not sustainable, then you've got a whole suite of things. I don't disagree with you, Martijn, what you've said. It is very unusual, and there's lots of stuff. But my fear is this: you get a planning in principle, that's the end of the road. Well, I'd like to see how many have fallen at the next hurdle. I bet the answer to that is 0. But I still think there is a suite of things there that don't make this site good plan making.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I think to add to that, you've got to think what's there currently, right? It's open paddocks and fields, right? And you look, it's a very rural character of the area. I think if you take that away, that changes the entire landscape, it changes the entire look. And even if, I think we're going to create just an additional urbanisation of the area during this development. And even I think if you looked at the report, I think it was the council's landscape and trees team, I believe, have objected to this as well.
Yes, they have objected. Quite limited information was provided because there's limited information as part of the application as to why there would be landscape harm. Again, as the officer, I didn't agree with the assessment and ultimately considered there to be limited landscape harm because, as you say, there's currently undeveloped land and putting in 9 dwellings would alter its appearance. But in terms of wider harm, it's not considered that it would be detrimental. And then referring back to that presumption in favour of sustainable development, it's not been shown that it would demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. So yes, just to confirm that there has been an objection, but that's not tipped the balance of the recommendation.
Thank you, James.
We visited this site on Friday morning, and I mean, unfortunately you weren't there, Greg, Rachel. This site, oh, sorry.
I went afterwards.
Sorry. This is a wonderful site. I mean, it is an absolute wonderful site, and so how anybody can convince me that the view across that lake will not be impacted by these houses. It's the council's lake. It's our lake. By putting these houses up on that, well, let's call it the street scene from the view. I just think it's just wrong, but That's my view.
My only concern is that it's not accessible to anybody, yeah? It's not like dogs walking or people can go, it's private land. You can hire to, there's a small group who hire there for the fishing rights, but it's not rolling countryside for everybody to enjoy at the moment. It's not top agricultural land either, because it's a waste, it's a landfill, it's a former landfill, which is one of my big concerns with it, that doesn't address it at this stage, but we didn't know it was there. None of us knew it was there, so it was not that anybody else, only the people who live there know about it.
If you lived in Charleville, you know it's there. I mean, I think this is where it comes down to lack of detail, Martijn, because when I speak to the countryside team, they tell me that footpath, those 2 metres, is within the council boundary. So I can walk across that boardwalk and out towards Beggars Hill. So I could come in from that route and I could walk along there. I do understand what you're saying, because it was a very mixed view, wasn't it? I agree. That's why I went away and asked. So I do think, I mean, yes, of course. I mean, those guys fishing down there, I mean, what a haven. You know, even consider taking up fishing. But you must admit that from the lake, that is.
Can I just jump on
Yes.
just jump on the points that councillors are discussing in terms of landscape? It's probably worth sort of drawing out the value of that land as what you're discussing, the role that it actually plays, and that's something members obviously are kind of discussing now, and the relationship of the application site to the wider undeveloped land around it, whether that be the lake, whether that be development, open space across the road and so on, and then what scale of visual intrusion would actually occur with residential there, bearing in mind we can control aspects of scale, layout, external appearance, soft landscaping, and the site is relatively almost entirely screened with mature landscaping to all its boundaries, which on the indicative plan, and you can see the plan circulated earlier showing where existing mature landscaping is. So then the magnitude of harm on this landscape is concluded as being limited within the report presented to you. There is no evidence that we have extended views. It's not, as I say, you know, it's not rolling countryside. It doesn't display some of the more open landscape sensitivities that other sites that you've considered have shown, signifying gaps between settlements, or can be perceived by members of the public from a number of public footpaths for extended views, for extended periods of using footpaths. So in terms of magnitude of harm, the scale of visual intrusion, it's all been concluded as limited. I just wanted to sort of draw that out, because that seemed to be where the debate was going.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. And I think the other important thing is a lot of these things that might lessen the impact, if you like, will be at the next stage. But I think that was a stage whereby the application may be listed because people are feeling quite concerned about it. But we do have to move on, and we have got to make a decision on this permission in principle before us. I need a proposal from the floor to either accept the conditional approval by the officer, or whether you've got a proposal for rejection with the reasons for it or refusal.
I'm certainly not going to accept. So I will be voting against it.
So I take it from that you're not proposing a refusal?
That's my first statement. I'm going to wait to see what everybody else says, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
Okay. For me, this is a two-part decision. Yeah, I think I found it very hard to refuse it just purely on location, land use, and quantum. I have big issues with this one, and I think that the residents raised some very important parts that need to be addressed sufficiently at the next stage. But at the moment, you know, building on a landfill is tricky, but, you know, to say that it is, you know, impossible or shouldn't be done, I think at this stage we can't say. I think the sewage is a problem, but to say that that is a reason to reject it at this stage, I don't think that is, I can make that one. And the number of dwellings, 9, the quantum, if I look at it on the whole big picture, without having seen anything about where those houses, what type of houses there are, it's not, not something at this stage I can refuse. I can see bigger problems coming at the technical part for me. So I would make a proposal. I would propose to support it at this stage.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? That's Greg. Thank you very much. Right, the proposal is that we agree to the recommendation of approval by the officer. All those in favour of approval, please show. Okay, and those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. That's carried then, conditional approval for that application. Thank you very much for your time, a difficult one. We've got one more item on the agenda, members, before you disappear. And that's the supplementary agenda, which, not that one, which is coming under any other items which I decide are urgent, and it's the Majors Planning Appeals Performance Update. I don't know if this, do you want, just, thank you. Does this need to be presented, Brian, or you?
Thanks, Chair. Members will note the additional item in the supplementary planning agenda, which is a report to the Planning Committee formally on the Council's major appeals record. As members will note, and as has been presented to members in a six-month review, Planning Committee in April, the government monitors decision-making in a number of ways, the speed of decision-making for major applications and other applications, and the quality of decision-making for major applications and other applications. In terms of the quality of major decision-making, the government monitor how many applications are allowed at appeal over 10 dwellings, and if the number of applications allowed at appeal exceeds 10% of the total number of major applications determined within the monitoring period, then the Council risks a designation review and possible special measures. This was presented to members in April. It's included within the agenda for members to note. Members will be aware that at the moment the Council is around the 6.6% rate for major decision-making on major appeals, and there are a number of major appeals in the pipeline which are due to be, the decisions are due to be received from the Planning Inspectorate within this current monitoring period, and so that 6.5% could increase or decrease. Officers will report back to you upon, obviously, these appeal decisions, and you will note in your update paper any decisions of note, and we will update you on the Council's performance record for the quality of decision-making as and when we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, we're just being asked to note this. You have all seen it before, but I thought it was important that that was reiterated on this occasion. There's no other business, so I'd like to declare the meeting closed at 8:15. Thank you very much.